Hey guys, welcome to a new video on our channel. In this video, I aim to explain 5 terms related to PC hardware which you can see on your screen right now. Most of these terms are extremely common and you must have come across them at some point. So, without any further delay, let's start today's session. Starting off the list is clock cycle. Clock cycle, also known as cycle, is basically one electronic pulse of a CPU. To understand this, here's a diagram. Normally, the clock remains 0, that is low. Whenever the CPU sends out an electronic pulse, the clock becomes 1, that is high. It will remain 1 as long as it needs to, and then it will fall back to its initial value, that is 0. And this entire phenomenon is termed one clock cycle. CPUs require multiple clock cycles to perform an operation. Next, we will come to clock speed. Now, you have heard terms like 5 GHz processor, a 4.3 GHz processor, etc. But what exactly does that mean? Hertz is basically the unit of frequency. In the case of processors, frequency means number of clock cycles it can complete in 1 second. Modern CPUs can pretty much complete a lot, a billion cycles per second. This frequency is known as clock speed. Usually, it's measured in gigahertz or megahertz. Clock speed of a processor does say as to how good the processor is, and it also depends on the instruction set or the architecture a processor is based upon. I have seen many people who compare the clock speed of an Intel processor with that of an AMD one and claim that Intel is better just because it has higher clock speeds. No, that's not how you should compare two products and determine a winner. Intel processors and AMD processors are based on different architectures, and that means the way they get a particular job done is different too. So guys, higher clock speed does not always mean it's the better option. The third term we are going to discuss is IPC. IPC stands for Instruction Per Cycle. Now, what exactly is instructions per cycle and why are we talking about this? IPC is a metric by which we can determine the performance of a processor. It tells us the number of instructions that a processor performs in one clock cycle. Now, lean back, take your time, relax, and just imagine the scenario. A modern processor is capable of executing almost a billion cycles in just 1 second. Also, it can execute multiple instructions in one clock cycle. So, the number of instructions it can execute in 1 second is just humongous. Also, the way a processor is designed to handle a particular workload can in fact increase or decrease the IPC of a processor. The lesser number of clock cycles a processor needs to complete the execution of a given task, the higher is its IPC. A high IPC processor with a high clock speed will always give the best performance. Next, we will talk about something which we come across way too often. It's practically the first thing we see when we look at a CPU. I am talking about base and boost clock. First, let's focus on base clock. Well, a processor has various tasks assigned to it and it executes them while running at a certain frequency. Obviously, it needs some power to perform these tasks, right? Now, base clock, which is also known as base frequency, is that frequency on which the processor remains stable while executing the tasks and draws minimum amount of power. Let's talk about a term we don't hear too often, idling. Idling means when a processor is not performing any tasks, that is, it's sitting idle. The processor is programmed in a way that when no tasks are scheduled to it, it will downclock itself to a very low frequency. This is done to save power. Frequency during idling is much less than that of the base frequency. Well, how does a processor go from idle to either its base frequency or its boost frequency? Well, let's assume a CPU whose base clock is 3.3 GHz is currently idling at a frequency of 100 MHz. Now, we assign the processor a task which requires it to achieve its base frequency. To achieve that, it will multiply its idling frequency with a multiplier. Since the goal here is to reach 3.3 GHz, the multiplier has to be 33. And that brings our video to an end. Do give it a like or dislike depending on how you felt and leave your suggestions in the comments below. This is your host Shibnath signing off. Meet you in the next video.